Her true story from Arizona. My son-in-law screamed, "You contribute nothing," after I paid his mortgage. So I canceled the mortgage payment they forgot I made. He raised his voice. I raised the bank statement. Dinner was almost ready. The scent of baked chicken and rosemary hung in the air, mixing with the dull sound of television static from the living room. Emily was spooning mashed potatoes onto a serving platter while I set the table, slowly, carefully, as I always did now. My joints were stiffer these days. My fingers didn't quite close around things the way they used to. I reached for a ceramic dish, one I had used dozens of times without incident, but my thumb slipped. It fell. The sound of it shattering against the tiled floor cut through the house like a crack of thunder. Everyone stopped. Emily froze in place. The children, Chloe and Ryan, looked up from their plates. And then, like lightning striking after the thunder, Jared shot up from his chair, fork still in his hand, his eyes narrow and wild. "Of course," he muttered first. "Of course it's her." Then, louder, "Do you ever think about what you actually do around here?" I didn't answer. My hand was already shaking. I bent down, quietly trying to gather the broken pieces. My knee protested as I knelt, but I didn't complain. I never did. "That's what I thought," Jared snapped. "Nothing. You live here for free, you eat our food, you take up space. You don't clean, you don't work, you don't even say thank you. You contribute nothing." I looked up, stunned. "Jared, No, you don't get to speak now," he spat, stepping toward me. "You should be grateful we even let you stay here. You should be grateful that those dusty retirement dollars of yours were even remotely helpful. You think you're some kind of hero because you gave us a little cash? Please." He was trembling now, rage bubbling up from a place I hadn't known existed. Then came the words that would burn themselves into my memory. "You're lucky," he growled. "Lucky those old dirt-covered dollars of yours bought us time. Otherwise you'd be in a home, old hag." Time stopped. I stayed on my knees, pieces of the plate cutting into my palm, but I didn't feel them. I only felt the heat rise to my face, the ache swell behind my eyes. Not from embarrassment, but from something far deeper. My own daughter stood beside him, silent. She didn't reach for me. She didn't stop him. She looked at the floor. I slowly pushed myself upright and placed the broken pieces onto the counter. Jared had already stormed back to the table, muttering under his breath. The children sat in silence, confused and wide-eyed. Emily brought over the rest of dinner, moving as if nothing had happened. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her and ask, "When did you become this woman? When did you forget who raised you, who sat by your hospital bed when you had pneumonia at 8, who sewed your prom dress by hand, who gave you the down payment for this very house when Jared lost his job during the pandemic?" Instead, I took my seat at the far end of the table, the guest corner, as Jared called it. The kids began to eat. Jared poured himself another glass of water. Emily passed me the bread basket without a word. I placed it down without taking a slice. I didn't have an appetite. Inside, something had shifted. It was like a door had opened, quietly but firmly. A door I had left shut for years, believing that love meant sacrifice and silence, that family meant endurance, that a mother's job was to give and forgive endlessly, even if no one said thank you. But as I looked around that table, at the husband who saw me as a burden, at the daughter who no longer defended me, at the grandchildren who were learning how to treat their elders by watching, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. They had already written me out of the family picture. I was no longer Irene, the mother, the grandmother, the woman who had kept everyone afloat in silence. I was just extra, an afterthought. "You'll wait, old hag." The words repeated in my head like a cruel echo. I swallowed them, but they didn't go away. And as the dinner plates were cleared, as Emily rinsed the glasses and Jared retreated to the couch to scroll through his phone, I walked down the hallway with a straight spine and a silent vow. This would be the last time anyone in this house ever called me nothing. After my husband passed, the house felt too big. The silence in it was too loud, too hollow. Every room held memories. Our wedding photo in the hallway, the chipped mug he used every morning, the garden he loved that I no longer had the strength to tend. I would sit in the kitchen, sipping tea alone, staring at the empty chair across from me, and wonder how a home so full could feel so abandoned. I tried. I joined a book club, went to church more regularly, smiled at the neighbors, But every night I returned to an empty house, and every morning I woke with the same ache in my chest. When Emily called and said, "Why don't you come stay with us for a while, Mom?" It felt like an answer to a prayer. I remember packing up my things with care, labeling boxes with old photos and linen sets. I sold the house, said goodbye to the porch I used to sweep every Saturday morning, and convinced myself it was time. At my age, I thought, all I need is to be near family. Nothing else really matters. The profit from the sale, along with my pension and George's life insurance, left me with a decent sum, enough to live comfortably, modestly. I didn't need much. But Jared and Emily were in a tough spot when I moved in. Jared had been laid off the year before, and the mortgage payments were stacking up. The house, the same one I had helped them buy years earlier with a small loan, was on the brink of foreclosure. I watched them argue about money late at night, thinking I couldn't hear. I saw the red bills on the counter, the unopened envelopes. Emily would rub her temples and whisper, "We'll figure it out." But I knew they wouldn't. So one afternoon, when they were both out, I went to the bank. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't announce what I was doing. I simply spoke with a loan officer, explained that I wanted to set up automatic mortgage payments from my retirement account 12 months in advance. It took less than an hour. I walked out with a receipt and a quiet heart. I did it not for thanks, not for recognition, but because I wanted to protect them. I wanted to protect the idea of family. I believed that being useful without being noticed was the truest kind of love. They never asked where the sudden financial relief came from. When the foreclosure letters stopped arriving, when the tension lifted from Emily's face and Jared began sleeping easier, no one questioned it. I thought that was a good thing. I told myself, that's what mothers are for. We give quietly. We sacrifice without being asked. We ask for nothing in return but a little peace, a warm dinner table, the sound of laughter in the hallway, and for a while, that's exactly what I had. The kids were happy to have me there. Chloe would braid my hair in the mornings, and Ryan liked to curl up beside me while I read. Emily cooked with me again like we used to when she was young, her fingers still clumsy with a knife, but her smile familiar. Even Jared, well, he wasn't warm, but he was polite, until he got his job back. At first, things seemed like they'd get better. Jared walked taller, talked louder. He bought a new truck, took the kids out for fast food, started making jokes at dinner. But the shift in him was subtle, like a crack in glass that slowly spread until the whole pane shattered. It began with small comments. "Did you forget your plate again, Irene? Maybe next time you can sweep the patio if you're not too tired. I guess retirement means doing nothing all day, huh?" Emily would laugh nervously. "He's just teasing, Mom." But it didn't feel like teasing. It felt like warning shots. And soon the jokes turned into lectures. If I missed folding the laundry or asked about the thermostat being too high, Jared would roll his eyes and mutter, "You're not paying for it." If I voiced concern about the kids staying up late, he would say, "They're not yours to raise." Emily would sometimes take my side, quietly, after he left the room. But mostly, she just avoided confrontation. She told me, "He's under pressure, Mom. He doesn't mean it, it's just his way." But I had seen enough of his way to recognize it for what it was. One night after dinner, I offered to help with dishes. Jared leaned back in his chair and said, "Why start now?" And Emily said nothing. I walked to my room and closed the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the shadow of the trees outside sway against the window, and I thought about the 12 months of mortgage payments I had covered. An entire year of security for a man who now told me, day after day, that I didn't matter, that I was nothing, that I contributed nothing. That was the night I realized my love was not being misunderstood. It was being used. I had spent so long trying to keep the family together that I hadn't noticed I was the only one holding the pieces. And now, they were cutting into me. That night, I whispered to myself what I had been too afraid to admit for months. They don't see my love as a gift. They see it as a given. The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon, just as I was folding laundry in the guest room, the one Jared insisted I call my space, even though it was barely big enough for a dresser and a twin bed. My phone buzzed against the windowsill, and I recognized the number instantly. Daniel, my youngest, my boy who had moved out of state years ago with his wife and never stopped calling me every Sunday without fail. I picked up quickly, already smiling, trying to sound as normal as I could. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, softening my voice. "Mom," he said, his voice calm but too quiet. "Are you okay?" I blinked. "Of course I am." "Why?" There was a pause. "I just got off the phone with Emily. She was ranting about something, said Jared's been stressed lately and that you're not helping?" "I don't know. It didn't sit right." I swallowed hard. "Oh, she's just tired. They both are. Raising kids and working full-time. I try not to get in the way." Daniel's voice dropped. "Mom, that's not what I asked." I sat down on the edge of the bed, the basket of clothes resting beside me. "I'm fine," I lied. "You know me." "No, Mom," he said, firm now. "I don't know this version of you, the one who sounds like she's trying not to breathe too loud." The truth caught in my throat like a thorn. There was silence between us, until he spoke again. "Tell me what's really happening." So I did. Not everything. Not the coffee cup, not the old hag, but enough. I told him how Jared had been talking to me, how Emily had stopped defending me, how the house no longer felt like a home, but more like a place where I needed permission just to exist. There was another long pause. Then, quietly but clearly, Daniel said, "Come live with us." I was stunned. "What?" "Me and Amanda have talked about it before. If things ever got bad, we'd make room. You'd have your own bedroom, real space. The kids would love having Grandma close." "Oh, Daniel," I said, my voice trembling. "That's so kind, but I can't." "Why not?" he asked, confused, almost pleading. I looked at the window. The sunlight was slanting through the blinds, making soft stripes across the floor. "Because there's something I have to finish first," I said. He didn't understand. Not right away. "Mom, you don't owe them anything," he said. "You don't have to prove anything to anybody." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "It's not about proving anything. It's about making sure they learn what happens when you treat love like a bank account that never runs dry." He exhaled, quiet for a while. Then he said something that struck deeper than any insult Jared had ever thrown at me. "You don't need to teach them about love anymore, Mom. But maybe it's time you teach them about consequences." I sat there, stunned, not because he was angry, not because he was right, but because for the first time in a long time, someone had said out loud what I had only just begun to feel inside. That my silence was not kindness. It was enabling. That by trying to keep the peace, I had allowed my own worth to be trampled. That night, after we hung up, I stood in front of the mirror in the tiny guest room and looked at myself. Not with pity, but with something sharper, something new. Resolve. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. "Maybe it's time you teach them about consequences." And just like that, I knew it was time. The bank was quiet when I arrived. Late morning on a Tuesday, just the way I wanted it. No long lines, no familiar faces, no risk of running into anyone from the neighborhood. I wore a plain beige sweater and my oldest pair of walking shoes. I looked like someone coming in to ask about a forgotten PIN number, not someone about to pull the pin from a very silent grenade. The teller directed me to a financial services representative, a young woman named Claire with warm eyes and soft-spoken words. She led me to a small cubicle in the corner and asked how she could help. I reached into my purse and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside it were 11 printed bank statements, each labeled and highlighted, along with a copy of the mortgage agreement I'd quietly helped Jared and Emily keep afloat. "I'd like to cancel a scheduled automatic mortgage payment," I said calmly. Claire looked up, surprised. "Of course. Do you have the account number?" "I do," I said, sliding the documents forward. She scanned the papers, her eyes pausing as she took in the numbers. Monthly payments of $1,495. Over 11 months, nearly $18,000. All coming directly from my retirement account, all under my name. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she didn't ask. I appreciated that. "I set these up about a year ago," I said. "My daughter and her husband live in the home. They didn't know I was doing this." Claire nodded slowly. "You'd like to stop the payments effective immediately?" "No," I said. "I'd like to stop them after this month's payment so one more will go through, then nothing. And I want the mortgage bills to resume being mailed directly to their house, not to me." She hesitated. "Would you like us to notify them of the change?" I looked her in the eyes. "No. Let the notice come from the mailbox." She nodded again, this time with something close to understanding. I signed the forms with a steady hand. My name, the account number, the date. When I reached the final line, Authorization to cancel scheduled payments. I paused for just a breath, then pressed the pen down firmly. With that single signature, I severed the quiet rope I had been holding for them, month after month, hoping they'd feel safe, hoping they'd appreciate, not the money, but the love behind it. But they didn't. And I didn't want to be their invisible safety net anymore. Claire handed me a confirmation printout. Would you like a copy of everything for your records? Yes, I said. And a printed summary of the payments made this past year. I want to keep them. She stapled the pages together and passed them across the desk. I placed them back into the envelope with slow care, folded it once, and slid it back into my purse. Thank you, I said as I stood. You've been very kind, she smiled. It was a pleasure helping you, Miss Jennings. I stepped outside into the Arizona sunlight. The warmth hit my skin like a quiet applause. The sky above me was pale blue and cloudless. Not a single breeze stirred the air. But inside, I felt something shift. Not rage, not revenge, just finality. I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking back to myself. Back to the woman who had earned every dollar in that savings account through decades of teaching, of budgeting, of late nights planning her husband's medication schedules, of packing lunches and balancing checkbooks. They hadn't just insulted my generosity, they had insulted my life. And now, with the payments scheduled to end in exactly 30 days, the clock had begun ticking. Not a bomb in anger, but a timer of truth. The kind that would show up in a mailbox with bold red letters that read, urgent, past due. And when it did, Jared would no longer have my silence to hide behind. He would face his own reflection, not mine. I took the bus home, sat by the window, and held my purse tightly in my lap the whole way. Inside that envelope was more than paperwork. It was a record, a history, a reminder of what they took, of what I gave, and of the moment I stopped letting love be mistaken for permission. It began with a letter, a plain white envelope with the bank's logo in the corner and bold red text stamped across the front. Final notice. Payment overdue. Jared tore it open at the kitchen counter, expecting some clerical error, some trivial mix-up that would be resolved with a phone call. But when he read it, the color drained from his face. 2 months overdue. Immediate risk of foreclosure, penalty fees, escalation pending. He read it again, slower this time, then again. Emily was feeding the kids in the next room when she heard his voice rise. What the hell is this? He slammed the envelope onto the table and paced. They're saying we haven't paid the mortgage in 2 months. That's not possible. Emily rushed in, wiping her hands on a towel. What are you talking about? He held up the notice, his voice climbing with every sentence. They're saying the payment stopped in April, that we're 2 months behind, that we're in default. I didn't touch anything. Emily's eyes widened. Wait, what? But the payment's always been automatic, hasn't it? You set that up last year. Jared stared at her. Then his gaze narrowed. He turned slowly toward me. I was seated quietly at the end of the dining table, a book in my lap. I had heard every word, of course. I had been waiting. He stepped closer. Irene, did you touch the mortgage account? Did you mess with something? I closed my book, placed it gently on the table, and looked up at him. My voice was calm. No, Jared, I didn't touch your account. His jaw clenched. Then how the hell? They said someone canceled the payments. Someone who was making them before. That wasn't me. Emily turned toward me, her face pale. Mom? Wait. Was it? Jared interrupted. Wait, are you saying you were the one paying the mortgage? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out a thick folded envelope. I laid it on the table and slowly pushed it toward him. Inside were the printed statements. Every transfer, every confirmation, every month for the past 12 months. Nearly $18,000. Paid in full. By me. He opened the packet, flipping through the pages in disbelief. His eyes scanned line after line of dates, amounts, account numbers, and my name. This can't be real, he whispered. Emily covered her mouth with one hand. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then I spoke. You said I don't contribute, that I do nothing, that I'm just an old woman lucky to be under your roof. I paused, letting the words land where they should. So, I stopped contributing. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Mom, why didn't you say anything? Because I shouldn't have needed to, I said softly. I thought love would be enough. I thought generosity could speak for itself, but when someone throws it in your face, calls it a burden, well, Sometimes silence has to end. Jared stood, frozen, his lips parted, but no sound came out. And in that moment, he understood. Not just what I had done, but what it had meant. For a year I had kept their roof from crumbling. For a year I had given without credit, without applause, without even acknowledgement. And for what? To be told I contributed nothing? That I should feel grateful. I didn't want to embarrass you, I said, but I won't let myself be embarrassed anymore. Jared sank into a chair, the letter still in his hands. Emily turned away, tears rolling down her cheeks. I suggest you call the bank, I said, rising slowly to my feet. They'll tell you exactly how long you've had to stand on your own, and how fast it's slipping away now. I left the room, walked down the hallway, and closed the door behind me with a steady hand. In that house, in that moment, the truth had finally spoken louder than Jared's voice ever could. The house was officially repossessed on a Thursday morning. A white van from the bank pulled up to the curb before the sun had fully risen. Two men in buttoned shirts and clean boots stepped out with clipboards and polite voices, knocking on the door like they had done this 100 times before. Jared answered, still in sweatpants, hair unkempt, face drawn. I watched from the hallway, invisible to him as always, as the words landed. Foreclosure finalized. You have 48 hours to vacate. He stood silent, the document trembling slightly in his hand. His eyes were bloodshot. No rage this time, no shouting, just a stunned silence, like he had finally run out of people to blame. Emily crumpled to the couch when she heard. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing, not the kind that asks for comfort, but the kind that comes from knowing you let something rot right in front of you and did nothing to stop it. That afternoon, as they packed boxes and made frantic phone calls, I quietly folded my clothes and zipped up a modest suitcase. My hands were steady, my breath even. The ache in my joints was there, but the heaviness in my chest, gone. Emily found me by the door, just as I was slipping my coat on. "Mom, please," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "You don't have to go. We'll figure something out." I turned and looked at her, really looked. Her eyes were swollen, her posture curled inward like a child who had just learned the world could hurt. Jared stood behind her, arms crossed, staring at the floor. He didn't say a word, couldn't. "I do have to go," I said quietly. "You both made this house a place where I disappeared." Emily reached for me, but I gently pulled away. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I'm not going to stay where love feels like a transaction." I placed an envelope on the small table by the entryway. Inside it was a letter, handwritten, simple. I didn't sign it with bitterness. I signed it with clarity. "I was once the one who kept a roof over your heads, but now I need a roof that will keep me. I hope one day you understand the difference." She picked it up, but didn't open it right away. Maybe she couldn't. Jared, for once, didn't try to argue. His shoulders sagged under the weight of something he had built with his own arrogance and torn down with his own mouth. We didn't exchange a single word. I opened the door. The sun outside was gentle, Arizona in its golden hour, casting soft light on hard truths. Daniel's car was already waiting at the curb. He stepped out the moment he saw me, walking quickly to help with my bag. His arms wrapped around me in a way that said, "You're safe now." No hesitation, no resentment, no keeping score. As I sat in the passenger seat, I glanced once more at the house behind me, the place where I had hoped to grow old quietly, surrounded by family. Instead, it had become a shrine to resentment and entitlement. And now it was just a house again, not a home, not for anyone. As we drove away, Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said. I shook my head. "Don't be." I let them believe my silence was weakness. Now they've heard what strength sounds like. The ride was long but peaceful, the kind of quiet that doesn't need to be filled. When we arrived at his home, my daughter-in-law Sarah was already on the porch with a warm smile and open arms. The kids peeked from behind her, giggling, calling out, "Grandma!" And just like that, I was home again. A different home. One not built with wooden brick, but with respect, with kindness, with space for me to be exactly who I am. No pretending, no disappearing, just belonging. And for the first time in years, I slept in a room where no one slammed doors. No one rolled eyes. No one made me feel like love had to be earned in silence. That night, I lay beneath a quilt Sarah had stitched herself, the scent of lavender on the pillows. Through the open window, I heard crickets and the faint rustling of wind through desert shrubs. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. "I'm not lost. I've just come back to myself. And the stillness answered like an old friend. Peace looks different when you've had to fight for it. At Daniel's home, peace is waking up to the smell of pancakes and hearing children giggle down the hallway. It is Sarah handing me a warm cup of tea each morning, without a word, just a smile that says, "We're glad you're here." It is not being asked what I can offer, but being reminded every single day that I matter just because I exist. My room is simple. Soft curtains, a rocking chair near the window, shelves filled with books Daniel rescued from my old house, the same photos but on new walls, the same woman but no longer invisible. Weeks passed before Daniel brought up the will. He didn't do it out of greed, he did it because he believed in honesty. He had always been like that. Even as a boy, Daniel never liked secrets. "Mom," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, "I think we should update your estate plan. You've been through a lot. It's time you decide what happens next, not someone else." So a week later, we sat in the office of a kind, soft-spoken attorney named Mrs. Calder. Her office smelled like cinnamon and old books. The sun poured through the windows, touching everything like a quiet blessing. I listened as she reviewed the documents, walking me through each section. Then she asked the question that froze the room in a still, sacred moment. "And who would you like to name as your beneficiaries?" I didn't hesitate. "Daniel and Sarah," I said. "They've given me back more than I ever lost." She nodded, making the notes with grace. There were no dramatic pauses, no courtroom gavel, no confrontation. Just the sound of a pen signing away everything I owned, land, investments, savings, to the only people who had made me feel at home. That night, Daniel hugged me longer than usual. "Thank you," he whispered. "But just so you know, you never had to." "I know," I replied. "That's why I did." The next afternoon, Emily called. I saw the name flash on my phone and sat staring at it for a full minute. My thumb hovered above the answer button, not out of anger, but from a deep well of caution. I answered. "Hi, Mom." Her voice was fragile, hesitant, a shadow of the woman I had once raised to be strong. "I heard about the house, the will. Daniel told me." I said nothing. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For how Jared spoke to you. For how I didn't stop him. For all of it." She paused, waiting. "I miss you. The kids miss you. I was hoping maybe you'd forgive me. Maybe we could start over." I leaned back in the chair, watching birds land on the fence just beyond the window. I thought about the years I had spent believing that love meant endurance, that silence was dignity, that being family meant staying no matter how much it hurt. But now I had learned something else. "I forgive you, Emily," I said, softly but firmly. "I truly do." She let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob of relief. But then I added, "But forgiveness doesn't always mean starting again. Sometimes it just means letting go of the weight." The line went quiet. Then slowly she said, "So, you're not coming back?" I closed my eyes, letting the truth come out like wind through dry leaves. "No, I'm not." Silence again. And then, finally, the sound of quiet tears. "I understand," she whispered. "I just wish I had known sooner." I nodded, more to myself than to her. We all wish a lot of things. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like something that had been tangled inside of me for years had finally come loose. That night, I sat at the dinner table with Daniel's family, laughing at a joke his youngest had told, eating too much butter on my bread, wearing a sweater Sarah had knit me for no occasion at all. No occasion, just love. And I thought, as I looked around the table lit by golden light, sometimes your real family isn't just blood. It is whoever still stands beside you when the storm finally breaks. They invited me to speak at a community event last spring. Something about awareness and advocacy for elder mistreatment. I almost said no. I am not a speaker. I am not loud. I have never raised my voice in a room unless it was to call children in for dinner. But Daniel gently encouraged me. "It's just your story, Mom," he said. "You've already lived it. Now you just have to say it out loud." So I did. They set up folding chairs under the trees at the local library's courtyard. The sun filtered through the branches, scattering warm spots across everyone's shoulders. There were more people than I expected, young faces, older ones, even a few teenagers with their arms crossed. pretending not to listen, but staying anyway. I told them the truth. I told them about my house, my savings, the bank transfers, about the night the plate slipped from my hands, and the words that came after. I told them about Jared, about the silence of my daughter, about the weight of staying quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because I believed my love was best proved through endurance. And then I told them about the moment I chose to stop enduring. When I paused, no one moved. Then a young woman in the front row wiped her face. A man in his 40s lowered his head into his hands. Another lady whispered, "That was me." When I closed, I didn't offer revenge. I didn't speak about what they owed me. I simply said, "I do not need anyone to thank me, but I will never again let anyone treat me like I am zero." That was the sentence they remembered. Someone recorded it, and within a few weeks, it started showing up on posters, social media posts, even the walls of a local senior center. I do not need anyone to thank me, but I will never again let anyone treat me like I am zero. They called it powerful. I call it overdue. The truth is, we teach people how to treat us, even when we don't mean to. And when we stop teaching that we are small, unworthy, or invisible, people have to choose whether they will rise or disappear. I cannot control what they choose, but I can choose myself. These days, my life is soft and slow. Daniel built me a small vegetable patch out back. I plant too many tomatoes and not enough zucchini. Sarah brings me yarn and lets me knit blankets that no one asked for but everyone uses. And my grandchildren call me Grandma I, like I'm a character in a novel they get to visit. But my favorite time is just after lunch, when the sun is warm but not yet heavy. That's when my youngest grandchild, Lily, brings out the checkered board, 2 wooden chairs, and a basket of snacks. We play chess in the garden. I pretend to think long and hard, but she always beats me. She is 6, but sharper than most adults I've met. "Grandma," she asked the other day mid-game, "did you really make Uncle Jared lose his house?" I nearly choked on a grape. "Well," I said, "not exactly. I just stopped paying for it," weighing on my shoulder. I thought for a moment. "Because, honey," I said gently, "sometimes, when people forget the gift you gave them, you need to take it back. Not to be mean, but to remind them it was never theirs to take for granted." She considered this, squinting down at the board. "Like when someone forgets you shared your sandwich and they act like you never had one." I smiled. "Exactly like that." She nodded and captured my rook. "Check," she said, grinning. The wind stirred the leaves overhead. The scent of rosemary and sun-warmed soil drifted across the table. A blue jay called from the fence post. And I smiled, not because I had won anything, but because I no longer had to. I was no longer trying to be useful, or perfect, or quiet. I was just living, whole, unapologetic, still soft, still kind, but never again invisible. Later that evening, Daniel brought in the mail and handed me a card. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from Emily, and simply read. I saw the quote on Facebook. "It was you, wasn't it? I know you don't owe me anything, but thank you for standing up, even when it meant turning away from me. I'm trying to be better. I'm not there yet, but I'm trying." I tucked the card away in a drawer beside my old wedding ring, a few black and white photos, and George's tie clip. I didn't cry. I just sat for a while, in that quiet. Then I went out back to water the tomatoes. I know now that not all things we give will be recognized. Not all kindness will be remembered. Not all love will be returned. But that doesn't mean it wasn't worth giving. Because in the end, it was never about the house. It was about the message. About saying, without needing to shout, I was here, I mattered, I gave, and now I live. Not because I won, but because I finally stopped waiting for permission. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of someone you love, or made you feel just a little less alone, then it's done what it was meant to do. Because Irene's story isn't just about standing up to cruelty. It's about reclaiming dignity, one quiet choice at a time. Here on Grandma True Stories, we honor voices that were once silenced. We share true stories of courage, heartbreak, and justice, told by the women who lived them. So if you believe age should never silence truth, if you believe respect has no expiration date, then hit subscribe and join a community where stories like this are never forgotten. Grandma True Stories, because sometimes revenge is simply reclaiming your worth.